His son, and thankfully, I was one he chose to be with the Father for all of eternity. The word that got murdered.
And I've been so torn, thinking about this world lately. Babylon, truth is so deluded, and it drives me crazy. Babylon,
This lost world is so hopeless.
Babylon,
Jesus Christ, that's where hope is.
Babylon. No matter what they say, it's still so lost scriptura.
And I, behold, I have taken your brethren, the Levites, from among the children of Israel. To you they are given as a gift for the Lord, to do the service of the tabernacle of the congregation. Therefore, thou and thy sons with thee shall keep your priest's office for everything of the altar and within the veil, and ye shall serve. I have given your priest's office unto you as a service of gift. And the stranger that cometh nigh shall be put to death. And the Lord spake unto Aaron, Behold, I also have given thee the charge of mine heave offerings of all the hallowed things of the children of Israel. And unto thee I have given them by reason of the atoning, and to thy sons by an ordinance forever. This shall be thine of the most holy things, reserved from the fire. Every oblation of theirs, every meat offering of theirs, and every sin offering of theirs, and every trespass offering of theirs, which they shall render unto me, shall be most holy for thee and for thy sons. In the most holy place shall thou eat it. Every male shall eat it. It shall be holy unto thee. And this is thine, the heave offering of their gift. With all the wave offerings of the children of Israel, I have given unto thee, and to thy sons, and to thy daughters with thee, by a statute forever. Every one that is clean in thy house shall eat of it, all the best of the oil, and the best of the wine, and of the wheat, the first fruits of them, which they shall offer unto the Lord. Them have I given thee. And whatsoever is the first ripe of the land, which they shall bring unto the Lord, shall be thine. Every one that is clean in thine house shall eat of it. Everything devoted in Israel shall be thine. That is Numbers 18, verses 6 through 14.
And this is the Resisting Balaam podcast, a podcast where we seek to encourage the saints to stand firm in Him, on His word, against all of the accusations made by the world, the flesh, and the devil, as we engage the culture of death that demands the sacrifice of our children. I am Pastor Darren. That was Pastor Callie. And this is a Wrath and Grace podcast. You can find out more about Wrath and Grace at wrathandgrace.com, where they sell all kinds of great resources and t-shirts and mugs and all kinds of awesome Reform gear. And a matter of fact, I'm going to highlight this special cup that I have right now. We got them ready to print. And so this is a Resisting Balaam mug. A couple different ways that you can get this mug from Wrath and Grace. One is you can actually log onto their website, and for a limited time, it's available to buy there. And then also you can get one by becoming a patron. So you go to patreon.com/resistingbalaam and become a member of our Patreon page, where you support our ministry and help us expand our audience. And then different tiers that you come in at, you get different things. One of them, I don't remember which one it is now. I think it's the $15 a month tier. You get a coffee mug, as well as you get a copy of Callie's book. You get a signed Matt logo, and you also get access to all of our member-only content and all of our so you get the member-only content and you get all of our content early. So you get access to the episodes on Friday, whereas for everybody else, they come out on Monday. So you can find out more about that at patreon.com/resistingbalaam. And don't forget to go to wrathandgrace.com and check out everything that they have going on over there. All right, Callie, it's just you and me today again. Nobody to interview or anything like that. But I think it's...
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, the last couple episodes have been really good. We've gotten a lot of really positive feedback on them. I think people have really enjoyed them a lot. And so I think this one's going to be good as well. Of course, I think they're all going to be good. But I think this one
Right.
might be good as well. We're moving back into the legislative aspect of the discussion, and so I'll kind of bounce it over to you and let you kind of introduce what we're talking about today.
Yeah. Before I introduce everything, everybody go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel
Yeah,
and hit the notification bell. We're going to start putting more content on the YouTube channel, and Darren is about to put up some stuff for Patreon content
yeah,
in the
yeah,
very near future.
yeah. I keep
So,
talking about that. I have been working on it. I got a great outline for it, and I've been doing some recording for it. So we're going to be basically doing some basic level political stuff. So talking about how to think politically as a Christian, how to think strategically politically as a Christian. And so that's going to be coming out for Patreon members only. It's going to be about an 8 video series, but it's going to be hopefully some good stuff that'll be useful. So not theory, but actual practice. So
right.
great.
So, today we are going to be talking about this bill in Arkansas that was just put forward. Um, It is called an act to create the Arkansas Unborn Child Protection Act and for other purposes. Um, so, this was a piece of legislation that was just recently, like, over the past maybe 2 weeks or so, um, put forth in Arkansas, and it was written by Senator Rapert and Representative Bentley. So, what we want to do today is talk about certain aspects of this Senate bill. It's Senate Bill number 6, as part of the 93rd General Assembly of the state of Arkansas. We want to talk about some of the things that are good about the bill, and talk about some of the things that are problematic, either with strategy or dealing with the justness of the law. So, what did you want to start out with, Darren? You want to talk about some of the good things first, or
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Maybe we'll start out with the good. There is a lot of good. There's the bad is substantial enough that we would not support the bill as it's written right now. But there's a lot of good in this bill as well, and I think that it's important for us to acknowledge what is good, and so that way, we can show people this is righteous, this is unrighteous, and we can build on the righteous and get repent of and get rid of the unrighteous. So let's start with the good, and I'll. So you want to go ahead and dive in? I know that there's some very specific things we want to spend a lot of time on toward the end of the bill. But what did you find as you were reading through this legislation? It's pretty short. It's only 4 pages long. It's
right,
one of the shorter abortion bills that I've actually read recently.
right,
Because usually they'll
well,
go through and deleting parts of the code and things like that. This doesn't do any of that. So,
right.
why don't you go ahead and dive in? What
Let's
do you find to be helpful or useful or positive, I should say?
Okay, so we're gonna skip the legislative findings and intent, and depending on how much time we have, we'll get back to that. That covers the bulk of the bill, honestly. But when you get to the definitions, I think the definitions, some of them are pretty good, as they talk about what abortion is, the use of prescribing, administering, or procuring or selling of any instrument, medicine, or drug, or any other substance, device, or means with the purpose to terminate the pregnancy of a woman, with the knowledge that termination by any of those means will, with reasonable likelihood, cause the death of the unborn child. I think that's fairly adequate, saying what is abortion, and it uses all of these various means, as long as there's the intention of the killing of the child, or there's a reasonable understanding that the death of the unborn child will happen because of this administering of drug, medicine, instrument, whatever. So I think that's pretty good. um, I think that it's good to say that it is not an abortion, if you are just removing the dead unborn child that was caused by a miscarriage, I think that's an important thing to say. The removal of an ectopic pregnancy, I think that is a good thing to say.
Yeah.
I think it's good to say that um, it is not to be considered abortion if you are performing a life saving measure and the child dies from that. I think that is a good qualification to make. Um,
Yeah, I would. One other thing I would point out in the definitions here. There's one thing I don't like in number 3. We'll come back to that.
well, yeah, right. That was that's why I stopped there.
That one off there, yeah. But number 4, I do think it says unborn child means an individual organism of the species Homo sapien from fertilization until live birth.
Right,
It's pretty
and
much,
that combines with number 2 that talks about what fertilization is.
yeah,
So
yeah. That's
I think those are helpful.
go ahead.
No, I think those definitions are all helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, there was one other thing we want to talk about that was helpful down at the bottom here. Do you want to get into that now, or do you want to wait until we talk about it?
Right. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So the next section is called prohibitions,
Yeah,
and this is what the bill is saying that you cannot do, right? The prohibitions. Um, in the prohibition section, there is a subsection that says it is not a prohibition, right?
yeah,
So what we're talking about here is what is an affirmative defense? What can you use to justify the action that you took? For example, like self defense or coercion. These are called affirmative defenses for prosecution. So this states that it is an affirmative defense to prosecution under this section if a licensed physician provides medical treatment to a pregnant woman which results in the accidental or unintentional injury or death to the unborn child.
yeah.
Now, I think this is a very important caveat to make in the piece of legislation. It's something that we see in the Oklahoma bills as well as in Texas, and it's normal medical language um, to keep the doctor from being sued for medical malpractice and for being charged with criminal homicide for performing medical treatment that the woman needs or the child needs. And during that treatment, the child dies. We do not want to say that just because a child dies, that it is um, prosecutable,
Yeah.
right? That is not what we are saying. We are saying that there are viable defenses, affirmative defenses, when a child dies to not prosecute either the woman, the doctor, or anybody that helps facilitate, right? And this would be one of those defenses that I think are an affirmative defense that we should support.
So, really quick, because some people may take this and they might confuse this with like a life of the mother exception. So, what is the difference between
Right.
a life of the mother exception?
We should probably do a whole episode on that because really that it is that broad, especially when we start using the Bolton definition.
Yeah,
When people are talking and they say the life of the mother, what they intend for people to think about is this woman will 100% die.
yeah,
But that is not what the legal definition
yeah,
entails.
yeah. So,
So let's do a whole episode on that, but let's real quickly deal with that here. So what would you have to say
well, I think
shortly
a
on that?
lot of things. I think a lot of times part of the problem is there's legalese involved in this, and sometimes we
Right.
don't know the legalese. So, when it talks about an affirmative defense here, what it's talking about is okay. A doctor had to perform a procedure on a mother. She was pregnant. He's trying to help the mother. He's not trying to kill the baby, right? And,
Right.
and the baby dies. It is an affirmative defense. If he has to go to court, if he gets prosecuted, or an
Right.
affirmative defense that his attorney can go to the judge and say, this was the case. And the judge can
Right.
rule whether or not that was the case, if it could be used as defense. That's what
Correct.
it's talking about when it's talking about affirmative defense here. So it's far more
Right.
narrow than having. It's basically saying the doctor has this legal defense to protect himself in the instance
Right.
described here, and that's
Right.
far more narrow a thing than just
Right.
throwing out a life of the mother exception, which opens a huge hole that
Correct.
basically permits abortion on demand. Um,
Right.
according to what you were talking about, according to what the Supreme Court has ruled, constitutes life of the mother at this point. And so I would
Right.
think that's an important distinction. And I think it's important
Right.
to have this language in our legislation so that people understand we're not trying to prosecute doctors that are trying to save the lives of women, and
Or the child.
or the
You
child.
know.
Absolutely. That's another, or they're
Right.
trying to save the baby and the baby dies. That's not murder. Right. And
Right.
that distinction is very important and good to draw.
Right.
So this would be
So
my
those are some of the thing. Those are some of the good things in the bill.
yeah.
Um, but it is more problematic than good.
Let me
Honestly,
throw out
this
one other
bill.
good thing here, if you don't mind, Kelly.
All right.
I mentioned this to you when we were talking earlier. I think it's kind of a shaky thing to mention, but I'm going to bring it up anyway with some caveats. One thing I like about this bill, um, even though I said we'd never support this, I would never support this bill. I would never get behind it because of what we're getting ready to talk about. This bill is outside of the pro-life mainstream. It's outside of the pro-life establishment. This is the kind of a bill that the senator and the representative who authored this bill are bringing forth a bill that is probably contrary to Right to Life. Right to Life, the Right to Life organizations, Arkansas Right to Life, National Right to Life, are not going to like this bill. They're not going to agree with this bill. They're going to have
Right.
problems with the fact that this bill was even authored. And so I
Right.
think that it's useful to look at that and say, this state representative and this state senator might be people that we want to talk to about what we're trying to accomplish because clearly they don't mind bucking the political establishment. And so, from
Right.
that sense, I think that is a good thing. Now, I don't know who's behind the bill. I don't know who the activists are that are behind the bill that approached this representative and this senator to author the legislation. The activist, it may be a different story. They might know this is not a
Right.
fully righteous bill, and so forth. It's part of their strategy. But as far as the legislators go, one of the things I like about this bill, even though there's some major things I don't like, I really like that it comes out from underneath of the political establishment and sort of bucks against the do nothing pro life establishment. And so, even though it
Mhm.
has some problems, I just wanted to make note of that.
Right. Right. I mean, it is more stringent than like even a heartbeat bill,
Oh, yeah.
but it is still just as unjust for many of the same reasons.
Agreed. Agreed. Wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure we're going to spend the next rest of the episode here talking about how it's unjust. And I want to make sure and say I'm not complimenting or I would never get behind or lobby for this bill or do activism for this bill because of some of the things that we're getting ready to talk about. But when you
But
see
it does show a shift, right?
exactly,
It shows a shift in where people are willing to go.
yeah,
We just need to push them harder.
when we start seeing bills like this, I think what they show is that we are actually pulling the conversation in our direction. You know,
Right.
7 or 8 years ago, the argument was about whether or not you could have exceptions for rape and life of the mother.
Right.
In most of the states we're
Right.
working in now, that's not even being discussed anymore, right? Like that,
Right.
taking that one off the table. And we're pulling the conversation to the right. And that's part of the reason that we have to maintain the hard line that we're maintaining. We are no compromise. But when we start seeing bills like this arise, what we're seeing people from the political class saying, well, what about this? And the what about this things are starting to come more in our direction. And so that's actually a good sign. But we still have to be honest about the problems with the bill too. There are big problems with the bill. And that's important to discuss as well. So
Yeah. and that's true. I mean, seeing the shift is showing that the shaky ground that they've been on is even more shaky now.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're starting to see that the people, we're not going to compromise with anything less than complete and total abolition of abortion, and we're making that the standard by which the life issue is determined. And so more and
Right.
more are going to start coming our way. And so even though this is a bad bill, we can still look at it and acknowledge, okay, the conversation's starting to move in our direction. Don't take it easy. Don't take your foot off the gas
Right.
pedal. We need to keep pushing just as hard as we've been pushing, if not harder. We need to double down because we're starting to pull things in the right direction. So that's one positive, I would say.
Right. And they're going to claim that this is similar to a bill of abolition, and it's not. And we're going to point out some of the reasons why it's not. Um, the Free the States guys, they also have a lot of content out there as they describe what is a bill of abolition.
Yeah.
So if you have a chance, go check out some of their stuff. They have some really good series on the distinctions, the distinctives that make something an abolitionist bill. Um, but yeah, let's go ahead and start dealing with some of the issues that we have with it. You
Yeah.
want to just like go straight down this list and of prohibition and start with like A,
Yeah.
and
That's probably,
we'll just keep going down.
yeah, because I think most of our big issues are in the prohibitions. Although, let's jump back up real quick. Do you want to hit number 3 in the,
Well,
or do you just,
yeah, that's going to tie into A and the prohibition,
okay,
so
so we can look at,
it'll come together.
yeah. All right. So I'm going to read A then, and then you and I can
All
discuss,
right,
but we'll do it that way. So
all right.
Prohibition A, which is line 19 on page 4 of the bill, says a person shall not purposefully perform or attempt to perform an abortion except to save the life of a pregnant woman in a medical emergency.
So, okay, some good things about this. Rape exception is off the table,
Yeah.
right? Incest exception is off the table. That's actually good, right? So the only thing that they have here that we would have issues with in this statement deals with the life of the pregnant woman in a medical emergency.
Yeah.
And the reason that we're going to have an issue with that is because of how they define medical emergency and then dovetail that with the Bolton case of the health and life of the mother, right?
Yeah. We need to do
So
it.
it's good that it says that they shall not purposely perform or attempt to perform an abortion. It's this exception that we take issue with. And the reason that we take issue with it is because of the language of what's entailed behind those words, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So and that's important to make note of. We're not, the reason that we take issue of it is not because we want women to die. That's what's going to be said out there. That's the narrative. Well, they take
Right.
issue with this because they want both the baby and the mother to die. Well, clearly, like, certainly that is not the case. It's not that we don't want the life of mothers to be protected, which is exactly the reason that we favor D under prohibition.
Right.
Is a
Right.
fall
Because
relate.
there's going to be a distinction between D and what's being said here in this prohibition.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Fully agree with you.
If you start talking about life of the mother according to what the Supreme Court has ruled, which you referenced already, anything can count as life of the mother. If with this exception in this bill as it is right now, it will likely not save babies because
Right.
it leaves it to the abortion doctor to determine whether or not the life of the mother is at risk, which can include anything up to, she was having a bad day, she has emotional trauma, she has psychological trauma, she has, fill in the blank with pretty much anything that falls under the medical banner excuse that you might be able to come up with this A being the way that it is, this bill virtually becomes useless. And I hate,
Well, and
yeah, I hate to just
go
say
ahead.
it that way, but virtually it is useless. It's not going to stop abortion from happening as it is.
Right. So this here's where the distinction is being made, right? So this is saying about the abortion being the intended killing of the child in order to um, because it is necessary to remove that child. It's necessary to intentionally kill the child in order that the woman survives because of her physical disorder, physical illness, or physical injury. That is different than saying, I am treating this woman for this physical disorder, physical illness, or injury. And during the process of treating them, the child dies
Yeah.
and we remove the child.
Yeah.
Right? That's two different things.
That distinction is paramount. And the
Right.
politicians are going to look at us when we say that, and they're going to say, well, it says right there in the language, only in the case of medical emergency. But the problem is the Supreme Court has already determined what that language means. And
Right.
it
Right.
doesn't just mean what we think of when we think of medical emergency. That term,
Right.
medical emergency, is a technical term in legal language. It has a meaning, and it doesn't mean what you and I think it means in terms of everyday
Right.
conversation. And so,
Right. And in addition to that, I mean, that's all true. And that's what we're going to have an episode on.
yeah,
But in addition to that, the distinctions that are being made between D in the prohibition and A, which uses the definition of three, is that in D, you are treating the woman for her disability,
yeah,
her injury, or her disorder, or her illness. And in the process of treating her, the child dies accidentally, or the child dies as a result of that. That is different than saying, I'm going to kill the child intentionally because you have this disorder, illness, or injury.
yeah,
That's the distinction that those two um, paragraphs are making. And yes, it does also fall on the legal definitions, or the Supreme Court decision to define what the health of the mother is during the Bolton case.
yeah,
Um, but in addition to that, these two paragraphs we're talking about what is the intention of the procedure that's being done,
yeah,
right? It is the intention, I'm treating this woman, and as I'm treating this woman, the child dies, not because I'm killing the child as the treatment, versus I'm intentionally killing the child as part of the treatment.
yeah. And what removing A,
That's what I'm trying to say.
yeah, right, yeah, absolutely. And and that distinction is very important. If you remove A from this bill, right, from the prohibitions, if you remove A,
Well, the second half of it.
yeah, in particular the second half of it, if you remove that from this bill, what you have then is you have a situation where you already have D listed in this bill. What you
Right.
have then is you have a situation where the medical doctor has to consider the life of the baby in the way that he's treating mom,
Right.
right? You have
Right.
two patients. You got a mommy and a baby. And if one of them, if the baby dies while you're treating mom, but you didn't kill the baby, the baby dies. That's different than
Right.
you saying we got to kill the baby to treat the mom. And
Right.
you know that.
Right. And that's really the key point, what you just said.
So we're
And
trying.
the second half of A makes killing the baby as the treatment.
Yes, right, exactly, exactly. And we're saying we could never get behind or support a bill that had that kind of a language in it.
Right.
Because like we're going to talk about in a future episode, that basically just keeps abortion legal across the board.
Right.
So okay, now let's look at B, because this is going to take us back to Roe versus Wade again. So let me
Right.
read it. B, it's lines 21, 22, and 23 of page 4 in the legislation. Says this: performing or attempting to perform an abortion is an unclassified felony with a fine not to exceed $100,000 or imprisonment not to exceed 10 years or both.
Right.
So the average
So
lifer is going to look at this
go
and
ahead.
this is a bill with teeth. We're going to punish the abortion doctor, right? We're going to
Right.
actually
Right.
punish them. We're going to do something about it. But we would say we don't agree with this language. Why not?
Right. So, and when I first started noticing this bill popping up in my feed, that really is what the people were saying. That's the part that they were highlighting and going, see, we're going to start punishing these doctors by, fines and jail. And go ahead and read the next section too, because they go together
Sure.
for our argument.
Yeah, so this is going to be C, which is a little bit longer because it has a section.
Well, just C1. Just C1 is what we need.
C1. Okay, so C. So letter C says this section does not authorize the charging or conviction of a woman with any criminal offense in the death of her own unborn child.
Right. So this section penalizes the doctor with a fine up to $100,000 and imprisonment not to exceed 10 years or both.
Yeah.
The woman is still able to kill her preborn child for whatever reason she wants to, by any method that she wants to, up until the point of birth, without fear of any type of prosecution or charge or conviction brought against her. That's what that line is saying, right? So this just goes back to what we've been saying about pro-life laws, that they are all designed for the doctor and have zero to do with the woman herself on what she is allowed to do.
So let's take a few minutes. We're going to run onto the street and do our strip ministry segment, and then we'll be right back. And we're going to discuss more of these problems under prohibitions on this bill from Arkansas.
Hey, my name is Cameron Gray. I'm the pastor at Harvest Bible Fellowship in Pendleton, Indiana. I just want to give a quick story about the very first time I went to the clinic. So the first time I went, actually, let me tell you how I got there. A mutual friend of mine online was sharing a video where he was out at the clinic. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. They're doing this in our own state. So called him up and I said, man, I will be there the next week. Well, when I got there, as soon as they were opening up around 8 o'clock that next Friday, I had such anxiety and angst within me that I was physically ill. I could not imagine it. And the first time, I remember proclaiming to a woman, we will help you, do not murder your baby. We'll say things like, abortion's not the answer, there's life in your womb. And I saw her ignore the preaching and walk right into the door. I could not believe that this was actually happening within our own society, an absolute holocaust. But let me tell you why I go as a pastor. I go because the gospel of Jesus Christ needs to be proclaimed everywhere, and definitely needs to be proclaimed outside the gates of hell. So people that want to preach, I know Spurgeon and others would want their people to be preaching on street corners or do open air preaching before they ever got in the pulpit. I go out to the street because that's where the gospel needs to be heralded, not just within the confines of the walls of the church. So I think that's been it's a different setting for me, and it allows Christ to be glorified, not just when the saints are gathered on Sunday, but also during some of the most horrific hours and times of what we have within our own city. So that's why I go. The fruit is up to the Lord. My job is to simply be faithful and go and proclaim His glories and to rescue those who are being taken away to slaughter.
We are Titus 2 women, seeking to glorify God through the teaching of younger women, biblically, to love their husbands, children, and be keepers of the home.
Not grudgingly or as a legalistic chore, but rather to joyfully sacrifice in loving their husband and children as unto the Lord.
Giving glory to God and finding joy in caring for our families, in only the way wives and mothers can.
As God has blessed us with female traits that make our work in the home essential to a godly home.
Okay, so we're back from the streets. I just want to take a quick minute here and invite you, if you listen to our podcast, if you do ministry out on the streets, you're out telling people about Jesus, or you're out at the abortion mill, or doing street preaching at abortion events, or at sporting events, or whatever else the case may be, and you want to send us a quick 2 to 5 minute video telling us a story about an opportunity you had while you were on the streets, or a time where you faced some spiritual oppression, or whatever else the case may be, shoot us a video that's 2 to 5 minutes long and send it over to us. And if it fits, we'll fit it in there. If you're listening now and you're not involved in street ministry, we want to invite you to get involved. And if you need some help with that, reach out to Callie or I and let us know, and we'll see if we can get you plugged in with somebody there in your community, or get you some resources to be able to help you get started on that. Okay, so we're back in. Hang on, I lost track of where we're at. Okay, so we're looking at B and C under the prohibition,
Right.
which go together with one another. And
Right.
basically, B says that they're going to punish the abortion doctor with an unclassified felony of up to $100,000, 10 years in jail or prison, or both. But a woman cannot be convicted of a criminal offense in the death of her own unborn child. Okay, so that's what we're discussing here. So let's talk about, let's look at B first. A lot of people are going to look at B here and they're going to say, this is a great bill. It's got teeth to it. They're actually going to start punishing these abortion doctors. Hallelujah.
Right.
What would be your response to that?
Right. So what we are trying to do is push laws that provide equal justice to all principal actors, all accomplices, and all co-conspirators to all forms of criminal homicide, right? So we want the homicide codes to be applied equally to all forms of criminal homicide and all of the actors within those forms of criminal homicide. What
Yeah.
this does to the abortion doctor, it says that he will be charged with an unclassified felony. Is
Yeah.
he going to be charged with criminal homicide? No.
No.
Right. And that's what we're saying that abortion is. Abortion is the unjust killing of a human. Right. So first off, we're taking it out of homicide and putting it into an unclassified felony for the doctor that kills this child. In addition to that, we look at how low the fines and imprisonment are compared to all other forms of criminal homicide.
Yeah.
That's going to be very important. The punishment of this form of criminal homicide for the doctor is substantially less than that of other forms of criminal homicide.
Yeah.
And when you get to the mother, she's completely exempt.
Yeah.
So it is not to be considered criminal homicide for her at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So why is that important? If you take a look at the punishments, right, and how they do not meet the same standards as other forms of criminal homicide, and you attach that with this medical emergency where you're placing the life of the mother over and against the child, what you have is the arguments in the Roe versus Wade case that were used to say this is why we're going to vote the way that we did in this unjust ruling.
Yeah.
That's a lot of words to say. What people are claiming are successful of this bill are exactly the reasons that the justices used to decide that it's okay for you to kill children.
Yeah.
And to prove that, we want to read to you guys from the Roe versus Wade decision.
Yeah.
And then we're going to discuss what it says in that decision and compare it to the language of this bill. You can go back through and read the arguments that the prosecutors were using and the defendants were using in the hearing, because they mimic this. But we're going to read from what the justices said about those arguments. All right. So in footnote 54 of the Roe versus Wade decision, it says this: when Texas urges that a fetus is entitled to the 14th Amendment protection as a person, it faces a dilemma. Neither in Texas nor any other state are all abortions prohibited. This is going to what the bill says in Prohibition A. Not all abortions are prohibited. It gives the exception of to save the life of a pregnant woman in a medical emergency. You can intentionally kill a child in this instance, versus what we were saying about D, that it's an affirmative defense to treat the woman and the child dies as a result. Two different things.
Yeah.
But what the Roe versus Wade decision says is, because you have that exception, you want us to believe that the fetus is a person, despite broad prescription, an exception always exists, whether it's through rape or incest or this health of the mother. The exception contained, and then it lists all of the exception laws, for an abortion procured or attempted by medical advice for the purpose of saving life of the mother is typical. But if the fetus is a person who is not deprived of life without due process, and if the mother's condition is the sole determinant, does not the Texas exception appear to be out of line with the amendment's command? What we're saying is that the fetus would not have due process if the sole determinant was the mother against the child.
Yeah.
It goes on to say that there are other inconsistencies between the 14th Amendment status and the typical abortion statute, of which this is going to fall in line. It has already been pointed out, and here's the laws that it's pointed out in, that in Texas, the woman is not the principal or an accomplice with respect to an abortion upon us. If the fetus is a person, why is the woman not the principal or the accomplice? He's talking about this line. Well, this was years ago, so he's not talking about this law specifically. But this is a carryover of all pro-life laws, right? So if you say that it does not authorize the charging conviction of a woman with any criminal offense in the death of her own child, that is the inconsistency that the Roe versus Wade decision is saying. You are not charging the woman with criminal homicide or any criminal offense at all. Since you are doing that, why would we believe you that the fetus is a person if the woman is not charged with anything at all as far as criminal? And it finally says, furthermore, the penalty for criminal abortion is significantly less than the maximum penalty for murder, and it cites the Texas penal codes. If the fetus is a person, may the penalties be different. So in essence, what the Roe versus Wade decision is saying is, since you are not charging the woman with a crime, why should we believe that the fetus is a person? In addition, if the criminal penalties for the doctor are substantially less than it is for criminal homicide, and you're not charging the doctor with homicide but an unspecified felony, why should we treat the fetus as a person?
Yeah.
And lastly, if you want to pit the woman against the child, then you are not showing the child due process, and you're making her the sole determinant of the life of the child. Why should we consider that child a human?
Yeah.
So what we see in the first three parts of the prohibition of the Arkansas law, the very reasons why Roe versus Wade was decided in the manner that it was decided. You're just going back to the reasons given by the court and the means for why they decided that it's okay to kill children.
Yeah. So, I mean, the short version of what you just said in a nutshell is this law is a perfect example of how we got Roe versus Wade to begin with. You know,
Right,
this is
right,
one of the pretenses that the justices use when they pass Roe versus Wade is that you're not treating the
correct,
baby with equal justice here. You're not
right,
behaving as though the baby is alive and a person created in the image of God, a person who should be
correct.
recognized under the 14th Amendment as having rights. And then there's another problem, of course, as well, which is that, along with, in line with everything else that you just said, it's also contrary to God's law. It's not
Right,
treating the baby with equal justice. So here we have the shedding of innocent blood.
exactly.
You know, we're gonna we're
Right,
gonna we're gonna shed the innocent blood of a child, but we are not going to treat the shedding of that innocent blood with justice. And one other
right,
thing that I'll say about that as well, and this is sort of in the vein of typical pro-life arguments, but I think that it's important to say. When you look at something like Section C, verse 1, or verse 1, it's not the Bible. Section C, number 1. When you look at what's happening here, authorize the charging or authorize, it does not, the section does not authorize the charging or conviction of women with any criminal offense in the death of her own unborn child. They put these things in these laws because they think that they're being loving and gracious toward women. But the truth of the
right,
matter is that exception is probably the most unloving thing that could show up in abortion legislation toward women.
right,
This
right,
law permits back alley abortions. This
right.
law permits coat hanger abortions. This law
Well, it
permits,
gets even it's worse because if you go to the next thing that it does not prohibit,
yeah,
it does not prohibit the sale, the use, the prescription or administration of contraceptive measures, drugs, or chemical if the contraceptive measure, drug, um, or chemical is administered before the time when a pregnancy could be determined through conventional medical testing, and if the contraceptive measure, drug, or chemical is sold, used, prescribed, or administered in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions.
yeah.
You can still kill your babies as long as we couldn't tell that you could have killed your babies.
Well, and who's left to decide whether or not whether
Right,
or not it can be detected that the baby is there? It's the abortion doctor
right,
ultimately that ends up making
right.
the decision.
So,
Like,
so this is to shield the pharmacologist from selling birth control, Plan B,
yeah,
or even the abortion pill, as long as you do that before a certain time period.
yeah. So the same number of abortions would continue to happen. They would just happen in a different way. Is basically what. And this is in a certain way
And
worse for us because it moves
right,
the slaughter of innocent children underground. Basically, it's not visible.
right,
You don't see it anymore, but it still continues
right,
to happen, and that's a terrible thing.
right.
That's a terrible thing.
Well, we're already seeing a huge shift into do-it-yourself at home pill abortions on the black market, which, I mean, this prohibition or this saying that you can, it is not part of that, but it's goes in line with the move that we're seeing with do-it-yourself abortions on the black market, which will not punish the women anyways.
Yeah. Right. So basically, I mean, what we have here, and then the other reason that C is not C1 and 2 here as well is not loving toward women, is that it's misinforming their conscience. It's
Right.
teaching them. The law is a teacher. And C1
Right.
here is teaching women that it's okay for them to kill their baby. Nobody
Right.
else can kill their baby, but it's okay for
Right.
them to kill their baby. And that is, I mean, it doesn't pass the test of internal consistency. You know, if she
Right.
killed somebody else's baby, like you talk about all the time, that wouldn't be permitted. If she killed her baby after the baby was born, that wouldn't be permitted. But we are improperly informing the conscience of the mother of a baby growing inside of her, that under no other circumstances is it okay for you to kill a baby unless you're the mother of that baby and that baby is growing in your womb. And that is a
Right.
terrible thing that's a terrible thing to write into law. It's a terrible way to inform the consciences of mothers. And so this is no small, it's not like we're splitting hairs here. This
Right.
is very, very big um, inconsistency here. And not only will it doesn't, it's what gave us Roe. Not only is that the case, but it's also dishonoring to God. And it does not
Right.
remove the stain of judgment upon our nation when we try to pass laws like this.
Right. So really, the only thing in the prohibition section that's decent is letter D, which is the affirmative defense to prosecution. I mean, that really is the only thing. I I would strike B, all of C, and half of A.
Yeah.
You know, so
That, and then you'd also have to go up and strike several things, and then you'd have to adjust the definitions as well.
right, right,
Um,
right,
but I mean, on the whole, and so for those reasons, people say that we take a hard line, and it's true, we take a hard line, but we would not be able to support or endorse this bill as it's written right
right,
now, because it still permits for the
right,
slaughter of innocent children.
right,
It's still,
and it doesn't provide for justice,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So the thing is like all of the points that I've been reading about from pro-life organizations that are supporting this, Lila Rose, Live Action, and a couple of other. I've seen individuals really excited, especially about the fines and imprisonment of the doctor. But those are not things that we should be rejoicing because it's unjust. I mean, that's the reason it's unjust, right? It does not apply equal justice to all forms of criminal homicide and all active participants, all accomplices, and all co conspirators. But it does exactly what the law did when it gave us Roe versus Wade to begin with. So we should be pointing all of these things out when people are like, "Hey, this is so great." We should show them why it is double plus ungood.
yeah, right, yeah, and that is the we need to hold the line on that. That's where we can't compromise on these kinds of things. We cannot. The reason that we're pulling the conversation to the right the way that we are is because we're holding the line on a full bill of abolition. So I guess maybe to close it out here, because we're coming close to the end. Thinking about this, I know the response that a lot of typical pro-life folk are going to have if they get a hold of this episode and they're listening to what we're talking about. They're going to say, what is the matter with you guys? I mean, yeah, the bill's not perfect, but at least it saves some babies. Don't you want to save some babies?
Right.
So let's just take a
Yeah.
minute and respond to that, because I know people get that they get that objection a lot. How would you respond if somebody said that in regards to what we've said in this episode so far?
I would say if you're watching this on the YouTube, if you look on our channel, I do a quick 5-minute video that discusses that argument. And it goes like this, right? There is a difference between individual action and the justness of a law. The individual action of what you can do physically,
Yeah,
like if there's a burning building, you go save as many as you can. If you're a part of the Underground Railroad, you physically save as many as you as an individual can save.
Yeah.
That is not the same thing as standing behind a bill that is either objectively just or unjust.
Yeah.
Many of the Underground Railroad people that were saving or escaping slaves up to the north, or you know, Jews outside of Germany, or fill in the blank, right? Those are individual actions, and at the same time, they only support just laws, right?
Yeah.
It would. That's the distinction that we need to make
Yeah.
with that argument.
Yeah.
But go check out our YouTube channel. Um, it's one of the 5-minute shorts that we have, um, and I think that's what it's called: individual action versus the justness of a law, or
Yeah.
something along those lines.
Yeah. And so, I mean, my thought on a bill like this is the way that I generally respond when I see a bill like this, is why not just push forward the extra 20 yards? You know what I mean? And
Right.
put together a bill of full abolition. We still don't have one, I don't think, in Arkansas right now. We were just talking about our friend that is working out there. Need to get in touch with him and see where things are at out there. But why not just push for the immediate abolition of abortion? This
It's the
bill.
only consistent thing to do.
Yeah, right, exactly. You're already outside you're outside the good graces of the pro-life establishment at this point already. You're already everybody's going to tell you that it's not going to pass muster with the Supreme Court already, and it's not going to, not because of what they think, but because of what we've talked about in this conversation so far. So why not push for equal justice? Just push for righteousness, and that's the question
Well,
on
I'll tell you why.
the bill.
I'll tell you why with this bill, from the beginning, is if you read the legislative findings and intent, you already see them build the basis of judicial supremacy. I mean, they say some true facts, but then they weave it together as if um, they believe in the judicial supremacy,
Yeah.
and that's going to be why they're still falling under the Roe and Casey paradigm.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, we're 40 years into that, you know. Um, that is that's the dragon that we have to slay in the pro-life movement. Um, Judicial supremacy, stare decisis. We've done some episodes
Right,
on that already. I would encourage people to go
right.
listen to those episodes. I think we've done 2 episodes on that already. So I would encourage people to go listen to those episodes. But I mean, judicial supremacy is the thing. It is the one of the big things that keeps state legislators and local groups from having a backbone and demanding righteousness. And so,
Yeah.
uh, definitely go listen to those 2 episodes for more of that. And what we need to be doing is we need to be, well, in fact, I'll just talk about that as my encouragement. So let's just pivot into the
Okay.
encouragement section here. What word of encouragement do you think you would give to people as they're listening to this?
Well, I would encourage people to go and read the language of this law in particular, and then compare it to the Roe versus Wade decision, so you can see why we are in this hamster wheel, right? And encourage people to, rather than staying on this, let's seek consistency in our moral argument, which is you cannot unjustly kill a human because they're created in the image of God,
Yeah.
and all of the implications that fall from that. So that would be my encouragement.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. My encouragement, in addition to what you just said, I was going to get at this, a few minutes ago, but my encouragement would be off of this bill when we see things like this. This is the reason that we need to disciple and encourage our legislators that they need to defy tyranny and not bow to it. And they need to
Mhm.
establish justice, regardless of what the Supreme Court says. Abortion should be illegal in the state of Arkansas, period. And so, and what happens when you don't do that is you get this lunacy of including language in your bill that ultimately turns out to be the very language that is the reason that we got Roe versus Wade to begin with. And so this
Right.
is what happens when we don't have a consistent standard. We need to stand on the consistent standard of God's truth. Murdering babies is wrong because it's wrong to kill another image bearer of God, and hold fast to that and defy tyranny. And we need to be encouraging our legislators and equipping and discipling them to think in that way. So
Yeah.
that's what we got for today. Appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. Don't forget to check out wrathandgrace.com and go to the Patreon account, patreon.com/resistingbalaam. Until next time, I want to invite you to join the resistance and wield the sword of truth. Our Lord has left us here to navigate through this world as priest in the kingdom of God. Apply the mind of Christ and a battle against the culture that hates God and loves death.